On the day I turned 70, I found out that my husband had another family. When I tearfully confronted him, he looked utterly impatient. Come on, just accept it. If you were really meant to go to college, would I have been able to change that? We've made it through all these years. I never once complained about your low education, did I? Why make a scene over a divorce now? Do you know what day it is today? I asked myself aloud. My voice was so soft, it sounded like it had sunk into the depths of depression. Today is my 70th birthday, and it's also our 50th wedding anniversary. At my words, Ben's expression didn't soften, his brow just furrowed deeper. What kind of nonsense is that? At your age, what's there to celebrate? What, you think 70-year-olds should be eating birthday cake like kids? You're just greedy. Listening to his disdainful scolding, I forced a stiff smile. When you two left the house, I followed you. I was right behind you the entire way. After 50 years of marriage, it was the first time I discovered that Ben had another woman out there. The husband I had once slid a wedding ring onto. He was there so gently picking dishes for her, peeling her shrimp, treating her with a softness I had never seen in all the years we were together. And my son, whom I had raised with endless effort and sacrifice, said without hesitation, "My mom? That clueless old lady? She just nags all day long. Drives me crazy. Thankfully, I still get to escape from her once in a while." He added with a laugh, "Dad named me Mike because he regretted not being able to make things perfect with you. I wish you were my real mom." Ben looked at her with such affection. "In my heart, you've always been my wife," he said tenderly. The woman blushed and leaned into his chest. Two gray-haired people embracing like teenage lovers. It would have been laughable if it hadn't hurt so much. Behind the private room door, the three of them looked like a sweet, loving family. But I, as the wife and mother to those two men, stood outside like a beggar, frozen in place, silently watching. If I were still young, I would have kicked that door down and screamed until the whole restaurant heard. But I was already 70. My aging body felt like rotting wood, dragging along organs that could shut down at any moment. Even my blood vessels had thinned into wrinkled lines. My age was increasing, my brain declining, and even my emotions felt diluted by time. My heart ached like a knife was twisting inside it, and yet all I could think was, I should have brought my cane. At this age, my legs weren't steady. Just walking a bit, standing a while, and I was already swaying. Maybe because I stood there too long, a server finally noticed me. "Ma'am, are you looking for someone?" I lowered my head. In the reflection of the hotel's glossy tile floor, I saw my own frail figure. That cheap floral blouse Ben bought for $10 fluttered on a dried-up old body. My face, haggard and bitter with age, even the few strands of white hair I had left, were sparse and unsightly. She was just an old woman, nothing more. But not like the woman inside that private room. That woman, about the same age as me, carried herself with grace and style. She looked composed and refined. The server had respectfully called her Miss Elaine. At that moment, shame suddenly crashed back over me like a wave. My hands trembled as I stumbled away under the server's questioning, fleeing in panic and humiliation. Even after I got home, I sat in the living room in a daze for a long time. The older I got, the weaker my body became. I no longer had the strength or desire to fight over marriage, loyalty, or betrayal. But after 50 years of marriage to Ben, I needed a clear answer. I deserved at least that much. But when I finally brought it up, my son raised his voice in a harsh, irritated tone. "Mom, how can you be so shameless at your age? You've learned to stalk people now? That's so humiliating. If people heard about it, they'd laugh. You're old, but you didn't grow any dignity. Acting like some detective trying to catch someone cheating? What a joke." Ben looked at me. His expression was calm. "So, you already know?" My lips trembled. "We've been married for 50 years. Before I could finish, Mike cut me off, shouting, "So what? Dad and Aunt Elaine have been together for 48 years. Give it 2 more years, and they'll have their own golden anniversary." 48 years. That number knocked the wind out of me. I turned pale. My heart twisted with pain as I looked at my son, so full of pride and satisfaction. "Mike, I'm your mother." He didn't care. He just scoffed. "You think I wanted to be born from you? At least Dad's a teacher. And Aunt Elaine, she was part of the first group admitted to top universities when the entrance exams came back. She was a professor before she retired. That's a real match. What can you even do besides take care of people? It's embarrassing to call you my mom. How do you even compare to someone like her? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sorrow surged so hard it nearly brought me to tears. This was the son I had raised from the time he could barely talk, held him in my arms, watched him grow. I had given birth to him at great risk, given up so much for him. I even made a vow at the temple, not asking for him to be successful, just to be healthy and safe for life. But now, standing beside Ben, I suddenly saw how alike father and son really were. An unfaithful husband, an ungrateful son. Was this what they meant by blood ties? Maybe I had been wrong from the very beginning. Ben didn't stop our son from saying such cruel things. In fact, he seemed to agree. Mike may sound a bit rough, but he's not wrong. I've never treated you badly all these years. And Elaine, she's always been kind, never cared about official titles. So why do you have to keep picking at things? I couldn't even hear the rest. My mind had gone blank, filled with only one thought. Elaine Bennett. That woman was Elaine. My brain lit up with a jolt. How could I not have realized? Back when Ben and I were newlyweds, the county had just gotten funding to build a high school. Ben pulled some strings to get a teaching job there. Not long after, his distant cousin came to study at that school, and, for convenience, stayed in the house next to ours. Her name was Elaine Bennett, but she was lazy, never studied seriously, and always scored at the bottom of the class. Later, when the government announced the reinstatement of the college entrance exam, she took it, and after that, she left the village and never came back. That year, I had been full of hope, but when the results came out, my name wasn't there. Crushed and heartbroken, I didn't bother to check anyone else's results. Later, Ben told me Elaine had gone to the city to live with relatives. Now I saw the truth. She hadn't gone to live with relatives. She had gotten into one of the top universities. All the pieces started falling into place. Every detail, every memory suddenly felt off. My mind flooded with memories I had buried for decades. I remembered how often Ben claimed he was helping Elaine with her poor grades, always running next door. I remembered the village rumors, people whispering about the weird closeness between him and his cousin. I remembered how evasive Ben was when I never received my exam scores. I remembered how often he left the house right before the exams, and how all our savings had suddenly disappeared. Now I knew. Elaine had taken the college entrance exam and gotten into a top university with my score, and she had been in an affair with Ben for over 40 years. Everything made sense. My breathing grew rapid. I clutched my chest, my heart pounding so hard I could barely stand it. Tears, cloudy and warm, rolled down my cheeks, following the deep lines etched by time. Every drop reminded me of how many years I had already lost. My voice trembled as I confronted him, and Ben's response was both shameless and disturbingly calm. "So what? I just switched your exam scores. Why are you still crying at your age? Always so dramatic." Even though I had already guessed the answer, hearing the cruel truth still made it hard to breathe. I thought about how, after failing that college exam, I'd been stuck in the kitchen and the bedroom for the rest of my life. I remembered all the nights I cried in secret, the version of myself who had never gotten over her broken dream. My blood boiled. Hatred and grief blurred my vision. I rushed forward, grabbed his arm tightly, and shouted, "Why? What gave you the right? Ben, you destroyed me. You ruined my entire life." He had once so easily swapped out my future without hesitation. How could I expect him now to feel a shred of sympathy for my tears? He pulled away from me roughly and said with open impatience, "If you were really meant to go to college, would I have been able to change that? It's been decades. I never complained about your education, did I? Why make a scene over divorce now?" Mike, bored, was still playing his game and didn't even look at me. "Seriously, Mom, enough already. Can't you just calm down? What would you have done with a degree anyway? Instead of nagging Dad, why don't you go peel me a couple apples?" Their identical cold expressions made my face twist in anguish. It was laughable, really. After a lifetime of loving them, this was what I got in return. My chest tightened with sharp waves of pain. I collapsed to the ground, shaking, unable to control the spasms. As I slipped into darkness, I heard the sounds of my son cheering over his game win, followed by Ben's cold and scornful voice. Faking a faint at your age? Pathetic. The crushing despair and pain still lingered heavy on my heart, until a loud bang startled me. My eyes flew open. In front of me was an old, dark wooden desk, with books scattered from where something had just slammed down on it. You sleep heavier than the pigs out back. This is what you call trying hard? The familiar sneer in the voice made me shiver. I turned sharply, and there he was. Ben, in his youth. My heart pounded like a trapped bird in my chest. I looked around frantically. The gray brick walls, the faded red double happiness quilt, the worn wooden furniture, everything was just as I remembered. Then I looked at the yellowed calendar on the wall. The date stopped at May 20th, 1977. There were still 6 months before the first reinstated college entrance exam. I could barely contain my excitement. I nearly cried. Was this heaven's mercy? Had I actually returned to the point before my fate had been stolen? But no one else in the room could sense my emotional storm. 26-year-old Ben was still mocking me. You're always trying to cheat your way through things. And you want to go to college? Just drop out already. Better to be a lazy woman rotting at home than going out and embarrassing yourself. I answered immediately and brightly, okay. Ben looked at me like he'd heard wrong. What? What did you just say? Seeing the confusion on his face, I smirked internally. Ever since I realized what he had done, everything made sense in hindsight. He was well connected and always had the latest news in the education world. He must have known early on that the entrance exams were coming back. And Elaine had been living next door for a while by then, probably not just as a cousin but something far more intimate. He had clearly made up his mind to steal my score. But even so, he kept criticizing me day after day, constantly threatening me with dropout talk. In my past life, I had been terrified by his threats. I studied non-stop, didn't dare rest, nearly ruined my health. At the same time, his brainwashing made me feel guilty, as if going to school, spending money, and not giving him a child after a year of marriage made me a failure of a wife. But the money for my education had been saved by my parents long before their deaths. He wanted to claim moral high ground and still exploit me like a doormat. What kind of person does that? Now, looking at his young, ugly face, so smug and self-righteous, I cursed him silently in my mind. But outwardly, I forced myself to look sweet and trusting. You're right, honey. I finally understand. Just like Aunt May always says, the most important thing for a woman is to support her husband and raise the children. Studying is just a waste of time. I'll drop out tomorrow and stay home, cook, feed the chickens, be a good, proper wife. I watched with delight as Ben's face turned darker by the second. I nearly burst out laughing. What a joke. If I really gave up like this, what would happen to his precious little sweetheart? Sure enough, hearing me agree so easily didn't make Ben happy at all. Instead of being pleased, Ben looked absolutely stunned. What do you mean by that? You're the one who insisted on going to school. Now you're saying you're quitting? You think school is some kind of game? I gave him a look of pure innocence, pouting like I was genuinely upset. Studying is too exhausting. I'm already married. What's the point of putting myself through all that anymore? No matter how capable a woman is, she's never going to feel as secure as when there's a good man waiting at home. You're already successful enough for the both of us. A man works outside, a woman keeps the home. I'll stay here and be your perfect little housewife. Isn't that better? Ben's expression looked like he had just swallowed a fly. He couldn't wrap his head around how the woman who once pushed herself to exhaustion for her studies could now suddenly want to drop out and play the obedient wife. I stayed quiet and observed. I saw him take a deep breath, then lean in close and lower his voice. Eugen, you don't know this yet, but I've heard a rumor. There's a good chance the policy will change this year. The college entrance exams might be reinstated. I was almost amused by how quickly he broke. I kept my expression neutral. So what if the exams are coming back? That doesn't get in the way of our lives, does it? Ben gritted his teeth in frustration, but had no choice but to keep trying to persuade me gently. Eugen, your parents always wanted you to finish high school. Now there's hope for you to get into college. Don't you want to make them proud, even from the afterlife? My anger nearly exploded. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, drawing blood. just to stop myself from reacting. How dare Ben invoke my parents? In my past life, after he switched my scores, I might have at least gotten a high school diploma. But I suspect he wanted to erase all evidence, so I didn't even get that, left with only a junior high certificate for life. I always wondered, when people sighed and said I wasn't good enough for him, did he feel guilty? Or was he secretly pleased? If my parents could have seen all this from the other side, they'd probably want to drag him to the grave with them. Grinding my teeth silently, I put on a naive, trusting smile. My parents only ever wanted me to be happy. If they knew how tired I was from studying, how I can't even eat properly anymore, they'd feel bad for me. Ben hadn't expected me to be so completely resistant. He was too angry to speak. I followed up casually. School costs money every day and doesn't earn any back. I might as well go help Aunt Lynn weave baskets. Maybe I could even save up for some peach pastries from the co-op store. Ben suddenly lit up like he'd found a way out. You're my wife. If you want peach pastries, I'll buy them for you. He sighed, pretending to be earnest. I just want you to study for your own good and to honor your parents' wishes. Yujin, don't hang around those illiterate village women. What do they know? Women can hold up half the sky, you know. You still need an education. He really wanted to play both good cop and bad cop. I nodded casually and said, well, then go get them quickly. The co-op might close soon. Ben choked on his own breath, but eventually gave up and put on his coat to head out. Ben worked as a high school teacher. His salary included food and oil ration coupons, but not specialty ones. To buy peach pastries, he'd have to trade with someone for the right kind of ticket. In my past life, I was frugal to a fault. I barely ate or drank. But in the end, all the money I saved went toward bribing exam officials for her. And what did I get in return? A metaphorical slap to the face. Those TV dramas were right. If a wife doesn't spend her husband's money, it'll just end up being spent on another woman. Meanwhile, I wasn't about to sit at home doing nothing. Ben couldn't keep secrets in this village, especially if he was off buying expensive pastries. There was no way he wouldn't consider his beloved cousin. I slipped through the back courtyard and made my way quietly to the house next door, Elaine's place. Her house was old and falling apart, with several weak points in the structure. One window had never closed properly. Since it faced the living room and not the bedroom, Elaine had never bothered fixing it. Lucky for me, through the gap in the half-open window, I didn't have to wait long before I saw Ben return. Just as I expected, the first place he went was Elaine's house. I saw him rush into the house with 2 bundles of peach pastries in hand. Elaine came in right after him and quickly shut the door. She turned around and immediately wrapped her arm around his. Ben tossed one bundle onto her table, looking visibly annoyed. That dumb, lazy woman Yuzhen. Always knew she wasn't the brightest, but I didn't expect her to lose her damn mind today. Says she's too tired to study, wants to quit school and stay home like some noble housewife. Just wants to sit back and enjoy the good life. Suddenly craving peach pastries too? Those cost me 3 meat coupons just to trade for a rare ration ticket. She's got the appetite of a reincarnated pig. Elaine gently held onto his arm, her voice soft and delicate. Don't be mad, Ben. This is all my fault. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have to put up with her. As soon as Ben heard her say that, his heart melted. He quickly pulled her close and said, Don't say that, Elaine. How could this be your fault? Yuzhen's the kind of person with no self-respect or ambition. Even after hearing that the entrance exams might be reinstated, all she wants is to stay home and play house. A woman like that doesn't deserve high scores. If using her grades to get you into college isn't justice, then I don't know what is. I crouched by the window, nearly choking on their shamelessness. Justice? Let me show you what justice really looks like. When Ben came home later, carrying the remaining bundle of peach pastries, he once again put on the act of a perfect husband. Right in front of him, I slowly and deliberately ate every last pastry, crumbs and all, without saving him a bite. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't dare. He probably thought I was just throwing a fit, and that buying pastries was enough to calm me down. He had no idea this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, I gave Ben a very real lesson in what it meant to be punished without lifting a finger. The first time he bought me pastries, he still looked heartbroken over the ration tickets. But by the second and third time, he was numb. Every day when I opened my eyes, it was like a switch flipped. I had to eat something meaty. Our stockpile of lard disappeared at a pace you could see with the naked eye. Anytime Ben so much as sighed about me being greedy or wasteful, I'd press a hand to my forehead, close my eyes and say, I guess I'm just not cut out for school. If I don't eat something rich every day, my brain feels foggy, I can't focus, and I get dizzy. Maybe I should drop out. Spending so much, I feel so guilty. Of course, I was faking, but Ben, he looked like he was about to pass out from frustration. Still, because his little darling was just next door, he never dared raise his voice. He'd grit his teeth and gently reassure me, it's okay. I'm your husband. I work to provide for the family, and food is meant to be eaten. You're not doing anything wrong. If anything, I owe you for the way I treated you in the past. And just like that, he swallowed it all. If he weren't my cheating husband and she weren't his secret mistress, I might have been impressed by the power of love. In my past life, I juggled school and housework, cooking, cleaning, feeding pigs and chickens. Every day, I packed Ben's lunch myself before he went off to school. This time around, no such luxury. If the house was messy, then it stayed messy. If the animals weren't fed, they went hungry. If they died, even better. We wouldn't need to waste meat rations on them. Why? Because studying required brain power, and I didn't have the time or energy to care about trivial things. Ben had no choice but to take care of everything, going to work and handling the house on his own. Within a month, he had noticeably lost weight. And I didn't stop there. My demands went beyond regular rationed goods. I started asking for hard-to-get items from the co-op. One day I couldn't sleep well and said it was affecting my ability to memorize, so I needed a thick, embroidered pillowcase. The next day, I said my food lacked flavor and I couldn't concentrate. I needed malted milk. The day after that, I claimed the weather was too cold and my hands were too dry to write, so I needed hand cream. And then, when my mood soured again, I said I wanted to quit school and stay home, unless I got to eat canned fruit and syrup. Unlike in my previous life, I didn't hold back this time. I lived exactly how I wanted, whenever I wanted. Every day, my face was glowing with good health and contentment. Life had never felt so satisfying. Ever since I came back to this life, I hadn't shared a bed with Ben again. Of course, I didn't stop sleeping with Ben because I felt sorry for him. I just didn't want to bring Mike into this world again. I had finally come to understand how powerful genetics could be. If Ben wanted to have children, he could do it with whoever he pleased. I had no intention of repeating that mistake. More than once, I overheard Ben muttering to himself, calling me a shameless bitch, grumbling about how I kept pushing boundaries. She doesn't deserve all this good stuff, he sneered. Once Elaine gets into college using her scores, I'll make sure that woman learns her lesson. None of this surprised me. I didn't feel the slightest bit angry. But from that point on, every time he brought something home for me, I made a big show of it in the courtyard, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, especially the one next door. Sure enough, Elaine started to get upset. She began arguing with him. Just like the peach pastries at the start, everything he bought now had to come in twos, one for each of us. With both women making demands, Ben quickly grew haggard and worn down. As the official announcement of the college entrance exams return drew nearer, word began to spread and more people caught wind of the news. Excitement and restlessness swept through the village. During that time, I wasn't idle. I reviewed my textbooks while also thinking back on the events of my past life. In the village high school, besides me, there had been many other hard-working students who should have made it to college, but in my previous life, none of them did. There was Tao Chun Mei, 3 years younger than me, always ranked just behind me. She was fiercely determined, but when I saw her years later, after returning to the village, I learned that she got married right after her exam results came out and never left the village again. In another class, there was Gu Yingdi. He studied relentlessly. His family didn't want to support his education, so one of our teachers spent his own money to help him. That same teacher even offered to pay for Gu's college fees if he got in. But in my past life, I heard he didn't even score 100 points on the exam. Around the same time, his parents mysteriously came into a large sum of money. Then there was Zhao Jilin from my class, Lin Jun, the daughter of the village butcher, and Xu Wenshu, the son of the widow Wang who lived at the end of the village. All of them were excellent students from poor families, with no powerful connections. At first, I suspected Ben, but I realized he had only switched one score, mine, for safety. That alone had wiped out all his savings. Ben didn't have the reach to pull off a large-scale operation like that. There were very few people in our village capable of such extensive manipulation. It didn't take long for me to identify the most likely suspect. But if I wanted to stop them, I'd need real proof, and I also wanted to give Ben a painful, lasting lesson. So I started watching carefully, waiting for the right moment. Eventually, I found it. That day, I asked Ben to go buy something for me again. This time, he returned much later than usual. One look at his face, and I knew my plan had worked. From then on, he started leaving the house more often and barely even visited Elaine. Clearly, something more urgent had taken priority. I was more than happy to see it. Days went by, one after another, until finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. In August 1977, the National Symposium on Science and Education was officially held. Everyone knew then, it was practically guaranteed, the college entrance exams were coming back. By October 1977, the central government formally approved the decision to reinstate the exams. A public notice announced that they would be held in 1 month's time. The moment the news broke, people rushed toward the courtyard where the village loudspeaker stood. In the chaos, someone accidentally pulled the cord and broke the connection, cutting the broadcast short. But no one knew exactly who had done it. After the crowd had surged in and dispersed again, the village chief had no choice but to curse under his breath and find someone to fix it himself. Time marched forward at its own steady pace, and the exam date crept closer and closer. One afternoon, after lunch, several villagers gathered to relax and chat under the massive old banyan tree near the entrance of the village. Suddenly, a loud, high-pitched screech blared from the village's public speaker, echoing into every corner. Wang Irma, leaning lazily against the tree trunk, scratched his head. "Didn't they just fix that thing the other day? What's with the noise again?" Someone nearby replied, "That speaker works 1 minute and breaks the next. The chief and old Lou just got some apprentice kid to patch it up. They didn't want to pay someone from the county." The village was small. Any tiny bit of news was enough to spark a round of gossip. Before the villagers could get riled up enough to scold the stingy village chief, the loudspeaker crackled back to life. But this time, instead of static, it played a crystal-clear conversation. "We agreed on splitting it 50-50? Now you're trying to pocket it all? 50-50? What 50-50? You've got some nerve saying that. I was the one who found all the people to sell scores to. What did you even do? You, a so-called educated man, what a joke. Shameless, manipulative liar." Beneath the banyan tree, everyone looked at one another in confusion. But the dialogue from the loudspeaker kept going, and it exploded with shocking revelations. "I'm shameless? Then what do you call a village chief abusing his power to rig college entrance exam scores? If I go public with this, you won't just lose your job, you'll probably end up behind bars." For a second, the air seemed to freeze. Then came a burst of shocked gasps, but the loudspeaker didn't stop. "Go on then, say it. Like you're any cleaner than me. At least I sold scores to people in the village. You? You sold your own wife, that little Yushen from the Shu family. What a good girl. She doesn't even know you've been screwing your cousin." The words hit like a thunderclap. Instantly, countless eyes turned toward me. I could feel every one of them. It was hard not to squirm under the sudden attention, but the broadcast continued relentlessly. "As village chief, you prey on the powerless and think karma won't find you? You brought Gu Yingdi's parents in, didn't you? Got them to help you switch his score, and you even planned to sell the poor girl. You haven't been punished yet, why should I be? That girl never did anything to you. She didn't deserve to be used. You even planned to give your wife's college spot to your mistress. You've got no conscience." Back and forth they went, each trying to claim moral high ground, but both of them were already neck-deep in filth. In the end, it was like two dogs tearing into each other, dragging all their dirt into the open for everyone to see. Suddenly, there was a stir in the crowd. Someone had mentioned Xu Wenshu in the broadcast, and his mother, Widow Wang, was sitting right there under the banyan tree, cracking sunflower seeds. That did it. Widow Wang was notorious for being fierce, and now she looked ready to storm the village chief's house and slap him across the face. It took the entire group to hold her back. Someone shouted, "Call the cops, report it." One sharp-witted villager didn't wait for further instructions. He sprinted straight to the local police station. Ben had been inside the village chief's house while this entire mess aired, but by the time he came out, nothing had been resolved between them. He wasn't too worried, though. There were still 2 weeks left before the exam. He figured he and the chief would settle the profit-splitting later. He was lost in thought, walking at a steady pace. But soon he realized something felt off. Why were so many villagers outside, and why were they all looking at him like that? The crowd suddenly parted. Gu Yingdi walked toward him, eyes red. "Mr. Chen," he asked softly, "do you really think I can get into college?" Ben looked down at him and gave a gentle smile. "Yingdi, your grades are excellent. Of course you've got a good shot at getting in." But as soon as he finished, Gu Yingdi's tears spilled over. "You're lying." Ben noticed how silent the crowd had gone and began to feel deeply uneasy. Without another word, he quickly turned away from the accusing eyes and rushed home. When he walked into the house, I was quietly packing his belongings. Not for any sentimental reason. I just didn't want him sneaking off with anything valuable. If he took something expensive, I'd be heartbroken. Ben watched me folding his clothes in silence and suddenly felt a wave of anxiety. "What are you doing?" I looked up and smiled. "Ben, how many years do you think you'd get for orchestrating exam fraud?" His face paled visibly. Panic flickered across his eyes. He opened his mouth, probably to deny it, but before he could say a word, knock knock. The police were already at our door. "Ben Chen, please come with us." Standing beside them in handcuffs and utterly defeated was the village chief. I stood at the doorway and watched them both being led away. The door next door finally opened. "That day, you insisted on going with the electrician to fix the power line. I knew something wasn't right." Elaine stood there, furious. "You bitch. Ben is your husband. Why would you do this to him?" Ever since Elaine moved in, she had only interacted with Ben. This was the first time she had spoken to me at length. I studied her pale, tense face and saw the complicated mix in her eyes, guarded, jealous, and deeply resentful. "Yuzhen," she snapped. "Not everyone is born with your kind of talent for school. Ben was just trying to help me by using your exam scores. Once I get into college, you can just take the test again. Why did you have to be so ruthless? Ben's always been good to you. You're heartless." Watching her hold back tears and anger, I felt no urge to explain. She and I were fundamentally different. We didn't share the same values, let alone a worldview. Why waste time trying to reason with someone who didn't want truth in the first place? Instead, I just smiled slightly. "You know," I said, "I'm not sure what your situation counts as under the law. But if you're convicted alongside your sweet cousin, I guess that means you'll get to spend even more quality time together." I turned and walked back inside, ignoring the sound of her stomping in frustration. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had since the day I was reborn. A week later, the story made it into the newspaper. In the very first year of reinstating the college entrance exam, there were already people abusing their positions, taking bribes, and attempting to tamper with scores. It caused widespread outrage. The government took it very seriously, with national leaders publicly declaring that the college entrance exam was a bottom line that could not be crossed. In the end, Ben, the village chief, and all involved were sentenced with the harshest penalties. Most received 10 to 15 years in prison. Those who bought scores were also sentenced, though with shorter terms. As for Ben going to jail, it didn't affect me much at all. We had never officially registered our marriage. In rural areas back then, as long as a couple held a wedding banquet, they were considered husband and wife. Even in my past life, I had only registered our marriage after I failed the entrance exam and saw no hope for college, so I decided to have a child. It was only after our son was born, when we needed to get him registered, that I went to file the marriage certificate. In this life, I was immensely grateful for that outdated tradition. It spared me a great deal of trouble. Because the incident involving organized score swapping had become national news, the authorities decided to use backup test papers for extra precaution. The exam questions this time were completely different from the ones in my previous life, but I performed even better. As I walked out of the exam hall, snow began to fall. It was the first snowfall of 1977. The silvery flakes covered the ground like stardust, as if they were cleansing the world of all past injustices. I stepped forward, feeling as though I were walking down a white feathered carpet illuminated by holy light. Each step pure, full of promise. Years later, I earned a place in the textbooks myself. Unlike Elaine, who ended up with a professorship at one of the nation's top universities, I became widely known for my actual contributions to the field. Drawing from future knowledge and global trends, I led my industry to the forefront of the world. One day, while in the lab, I received more exciting results from an experiment. My graduate students were visibly excited. I took off my lab coat and smiled at the group of bright, eager faces. "Let's go, kids. Your teacher's taking you all out for hot pot." "Yay! Yay! Professor Shu, you're the best." "Whoa! I'm ordering the pork tripe and chicken broth." I led the noisy bunch like a mother duck guiding her ducklings. Together, we made our way toward the nearest Haidilao hot pot restaurant. While waiting at a crosswalk, not far from us stood a disheveled, impoverished couple. Their scrawny, dark-skinned son was throwing a tantrum on the sidewalk, rolling on the ground and crying over a toy car in a shop window. The man tried to shield his face and ignored the child. The woman, clearly out of patience, was scolding and coaxing at the same time. Finally, she lost it. She grabbed a wooden stick and started spanking the boy's backside. "You little brat! Don't you know our situation? You dare ask for a 15-yuan toy? Are you out of your mind?" The boy sobbed and screamed. "That's not it! That's not it! You're not my mom. You're supposed to be a professor from Qingbei. You're supposed to treat me well and pull strings to get me a job. Stop hitting me, Elaine. Stop it. Wah!" Hearing the boy's words, the woman completely lost control. She pounced on him and began beating him furiously. "Say that again. What did you just call me, huh? A son doesn't mock his mother's looks. A dog doesn't despise its home for being poor. Are you even worse than a dog? What kind of sin did I commit, marrying a useless man and giving birth to a beast of a son? My life is nothing but suffering." Their fight had already drawn stares from passers-by, and now they had completely become a public spectacle. Even my students couldn't help but turn to look, whispering among themselves. Then suddenly, the boy, bruised and red-faced, locked eyes with me. In an instant, he scrambled to his feet and bolted straight in my direction. His arms and legs flailed in a wild sprint. Startled, my students instinctively let out a gasp and quickly closed ranks in front of me, shielding me from him. He didn't even manage to touch the hem of my coat. He was panicking, jumping up and down, shouting at the top of his lungs. "Mom, it's me, it's Mike. Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong. You're my real mom. Please take me away. She's crazy, Mom. She's really crazy." One of my students let out a snort of laughter. "Kid, I think you've got the wrong person. Our teacher's not married and doesn't have any kids. She's the pride of Qingbei, you know. Don't just go around claiming relations." "Someone go get his parents already," another student muttered. "He's out of control." The woman rushed over, muttering apologies as she yanked the screaming boy away by the collar. They moved off down the sidewalk, the boy's sobs fading into the distance. The man, his father presumably, lingered a moment. He seemed dazed, staring at me in confusion, mumbling something under his breath. But I had no interest in engaging, nor did I care to guess what was going through his head. The light turned green. The crosswalk opened up ahead of us, a clear path beneath our feet.